Okay, and now finally, welcome to CSQLs, pipeline and qualifying. Oh, wait, let me start that over. We're going to do this over because we can edit this part out. Welcome to CxXchange Success Hour. Today's session is CSQLs, pipeline and qualifying post-sales revenue. And it's going to be co-led with Nir Kalish, who is a good friend of mine and someone I have so much respect for. And I know that you're really going to enjoy today's session too. It's also, this is a part of our series on post-sales revenue and how to build up sales skills and understand post-sales revenue in a SaaS organization from the post-sales motion forward. So we've had a few sessions already, but today we're really going to be digging in about setting up CS qualified leads, how to qualify your opportunities, and also then how to set these things up in a pipeline. In 2 weeks, we're really going to double click on pipeline, and that will be both for your book of business as well as for your overall CS program. So we'll just touch on that briefly today, but all of this is connected because if you're going to qualify the lead, you need to track it somehow, right? And so then that will lead to a pipeline. Now, enough of that. I want to introduce Nir Kalish, our co-lead here. So Nir, if you can maybe, yeah, great, you're off mute now. And if you can maybe just share a couple of words. I know you well, but not everybody else here does, even though we've seen you a couple of times.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into this crazy business?
Yeah, so first, Jen, thank you very much for inviting me. I think that you and I have a lot of hours together in the past 12 to 18 months.
Yes.
And so I started my career many, many years ago as a software engineer. I chose a career of building from the ground up engineering organizations. And after 11 years working in startups and big companies, my last startup as an engineer leader was a place that I did a lot of other things, including customer success, sales engineering, product management. And I really fell in love in the more of the business side. And I was started to feel less excited waking up in the morning and writing code. So I did a shift. And in the past 12 years, give or take, I'm building from the ground up customer success and sales engineering organizations. And that's what led me. I really love those two roles. And I think that I will say something a bit tough. Thanks to the recession, I think that a lot of executives, CEOs, VCs start to understand the benefit of customer success and the impact that we do on the business, which is more than just make the customers happy.
Awesome. And I actually first met Nir way back when we were on a customer-led growth advisory board together. And so this is a topic that we're both very passionate about, and I'm really excited to dig in. So let's go ahead and bring it up. And as usual, folks, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. If you've got thoughts on this topic, you can agree or disagree. Bring that up too. This is an open conversation. In about 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, we'll head over to breakout sessions and you can discuss in small groups, and then we'll come back together and share our notes. So let's go ahead and dig in. So basically, some of the things I've covered in earlier discussion were when we were talking about how selling during pre-sales versus post-sales, there's some similarities and there's some differences, right? Some of the similarities are when you're looking at overall sales frameworks, and that's why we're sharing a lot of that with you today, is you're still setting up an opportunity, right? You're still looking at an opportunity for a renewal, or you're setting up an opportunity for some sort of expansion, whether it's upselling or cross-selling, something like that, right? But when you think about it, there are some key differences. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll just remind and mention for anybody who wasn't here before, that when you're looking at the objections in the post-sales motion, it's going to be different than pre-sales because now they've used your product. And now when you're looking at, say, the onboarding process and how much they've adopted or optimized or haven't done those things, any of the hiccups, right? Like those things, when those activities occur or don't occur successfully, is part of what you're now working in as a circumstance as you're going into either a renewal or an expansion conversation. You also have a much better understanding of the organization, right? Whereas if you are a named CSM working with an organization, you at least have an idea of who is at that organization in a much more clear way, and some of the dynamics there, right? Or at least you would want to before entering into these conversations. And also now they have some real expectations. And if it hasn't gone well, that's where I was talking about grass is greener. They might be looking at other folks, right? And they might be saying, maybe the grass is greener over there. But if it's going well, then you have some things in your favor, right? And because it's hard to make a big change. Change is hard. We talked about that all last summer in our change management series, right? People resist change. Wired to Resist, my favorite book, right? And so when you think about that, this is part of the context that you're walking into. Nir, I don't know if you want to dig into anything in the slide or if you want to talk more generally first, as I was just mentioning.
Yeah, no, I do want to, I will go based on the slide just to make it easy. So first about the sales framework. So one of the things that we all need to remember is in the end, we are always selling. Although we want not to say it officially in customer success, the entire 12 months of a contract, or even if we have months over months, we are selling. What we are selling is the value, is we are no longer selling the dream, okay? If you think about it many times in sales process, you sell some kind of dream. You sell the ability to solve a problem. Sometimes they will do a POV where they can measure it and see it. Sometimes they won't. In the customer success, we are already, it's not selling the dream, it's selling the real solution. And we need to prove it over and over and over again to all the different players that indeed we have it. So sales frameworks are really, really important. The benefit that we have, and comparing to sales, is that we have 12 months to do those frameworks. Sales usually have 3, 4, 6 months, sometimes 9 months if they're selling it to really very large organizations. One thing that I will suggest, if you're not familiar with the different frameworks, read about them, try them out. I can tell you that my favorite one, where I see the best impact, is actually the medic one. And the main reason, Jen, if you can just go back to the main reason is that medic is the only one that actually take into account the economic buyer. And right now in a recession, the economic buyer is playing a major role in upsells and renewals. And not only that, he's the one or she's the one that can actually so-called force the procurement not to do negotiation with us because they fully see the value and they can actually say to the procurement people, guys, we need it, move on. Don't spend the time, we need it now. So I personally really love the medical. Two other things to remember between sales and post-sales is, if you look at the context, in both cases, we have detractors. The main challenge or the main difference, I will say, is that we have the ability to change the mind of detractor in a much deeper way. Because sales have, once again, 3 months to change the detractor mind. We have not only the time, but we have enough, if we show value to enough players, we can create a momentum where the detractors start to think, maybe I'm wrong. So many people in the company love the product, use the product, vouch for the product. Maybe I'm the one that take mistakes. Maybe I'm the one that actually should change my mind. Okay? Champions exist in both of them. Health is something that doesn't exist. Yes, you have health of POVs and whether the deal is healthy or not, but a lot of times coming from some aspect of sales, it's a guess. Okay, we have the knowledge of the customers. We have really the deep relationship we can really understand if there is a real chance to renew, not, or maybe not, if there is a real opportunity for an upsell or not, or maybe there is actually change in, in their business where we already know that they're going to buy less usage, less seats. And we have more access to the situation because now we are part of the company. We see all the situations that they have during the sales cycle. The buyer, the champion, the procurement, everybody will be very careful because if they will give too much knowledge, they know that it's going to be used as part of the negotiation. We actually never negotiate because if you think about it, we already come to the renewal where we have all the knowledge in advance because they already opened their heart and their company and their doors for us without even knowing it. Okay, risk and opportunities, same idea. We have a deeper understanding what are the risks, what are the opportunities. It's no longer, hey, if we will close a big deal, I will bring you to the entire organization. We now really know which organizations in the company side, in the customer side, can use us as the opportunity. We might already build relationship with some of those decision makers and so on. And the competition is very interesting because before the recession, many times nobody look at competition or the comparing in renewals and upsells during those amazing times of money was flooding in the streets was very, very low. Right now, every time they have a competition. So this is coming back to the idea of the value. If we show all the time the business value, they don't look around to find other competitors, right?
And
because it's already in place.
And really what we're describing here then is consultative selling, right? And so when Nir is talking about you're really selling for all 12 months, it's in the sense of consultative selling. You're consulting with the customer, understanding what their needs are, what their goals are, right? It's just that because we're in this post-sales motion, we're also trying to ensure that they get those expectations, that they're partnering with us so that they achieve those expectations, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, that when you're doing that, that is all of those activities lead up to your ability to either do a successful renewal or expansion, and understand their pain points and what they've accomplished in working with you, and to be able to refer to those things throughout, right? So that when it gets to the point of a renewal or an expansion, that it almost becomes a no-brainer, where it's just another consultative conversation as opposed to feeling like you're really having to sell. Although what I do want to suggest is that bare minimum, you want to at least be sure that you understand early on some things like with BANT, the budget, authority, need, and timeline. In that respect, do they have the budget? Who do you talk to understand if they have the budget? Do you know that for your accounts? Who has authority on your accounts, to make these decisions? Are you talking to that person in authority early on to build that relationship? And what do they care about? What are they evaluating it on? Because if you wait to the last minute to try and get that teed up, and you've been talking to them for the last 12 months and helping them achieve their goals, and you haven't talked to the person in authority, you are definitely on a back foot, as opposed to being able to lean in and get it done. So there are some things like that.
And one thing to remember, this is exactly why the handshake between us and sales it's so critical. Because if you will think about it, sales, assuming that you have a sales organization that was built already, they use one of those sales framework. And then you don't need to invent the wheel. You get the information, now you can leverage it and use it in the next 12 months. And the other thing is that, Elizabeth wrote a comment, which I agree, right, is that right now in the recession, everybody are knocking on everybody's door, trying to gain as much business. It's coming back to the business value. If I demonstrate a real business value, if my ROI is at least one and a half times comparing to what they pay, even if competitors knock the door, what I experienced in 2008 and now, the executive buyer won't jump because many times it's too much work for them. They don't want. Now they need to do another POV. They need to embed it. If they sign the deal, you need to onboard. It takes time. During that time, if actually they discover that the other competitors cannot deliver the promise, they are screwed up, sorry for my language. Because right now they spend 6 months, 3 months, and they don't have the same results. Okay, so they are very, very careful. If the ROI is lower than 1.5, then yes, many times they will say, let's see what the others one can give me in a better price. But price
And
only
so when you're
counts.
talking about ROI, and how would someone calculate the ROI then? You're speaking of actually just looking at the revenue that's either saved or produced by using your product?
No. So ROI, if you think about it, there are 3 ROI aspects on every product. You can either have all the 3 or you have one of them or 2 of them. My ROI or my value, my business value can be I can increase productivity of the team. So I know how to measure it. It's by hours that being translated to dollars. If an engineer hour is $200 and I can save 5 hours per engineer and we have 200 engineers in the organization, we know how much money we save by improving or increasing the productivity. So this is one business value of ROI calculation. The other
Okay.
one is my system, my service increase profitability, reduce cost, or increase revenue? I know how to measure it. And by the way, if I don't know how to measure any of those, we need to take all the executive team into a room and to understand what we are doing. Because if we don't know what is our business value and what is our ROI, it will be very hard for us to do business and to keep that business. Meaning we will find ourselves like many others, many startups right now. We bring a lot of deals before the 12 months, many of them are churning because they don't see value and we don't know what is the value. And the third main value is around security. Can we secure the business? Mainly, we will see it on cybersecurity companies, where that can be translated to what is the impact if you're under attack, what is the impact if your service is down. In any aspect, those are the 3 ROI that we need to be able to work upon. Everything else is technical value, which is great. Nobody signed a deal of $300,000 for technical value. In the end, the executive buyer is being measured either by whether your team is productive and how much productive you can generate or productivity you can generate, or whether your team can increase revenue, reduce cost, increase profitability, or whether your team help us to be more secure. And someone, Sarah, I think that you raise your hand.
Yeah. You mentioned the cybersecurity, which reminded me of something that I did in a past role for specifically cybersecurity, but I think it's something worth kind of keeping in the back of your mind as it could potentially apply to other industries, which is the cost of not doing something. So for cybersecurity, it was the cost of leaving yourself vulnerable. What are the fines like? What are some of the dollars lost of competitors that maybe did not protect themselves against something? What, like, ultimately, what is the cost of not taking action?
Yeah, but it's still coming. Usually in cybersecurity, we'll talk about the damage to your brand, right? Or if you have some rules
Yes.
that you need to stand behind, especially if you work with banks, this is where it will take place. The other aspect is so once again we need to we have the time to show the value. We need to be able to talk about the business value. We have the health, and the competition is once again it's knocking on the doors. But if I have good value and I know how to demonstrate it to the executive buyer, they won't look around. Okay, and I'm always like to talk about CS and relationships. Okay,
Right.
and I will be transparent. Why people leave their partner? Because they are not happy. Okay, if they are happy and they enjoy each other and they see value, they will stick together. They won't look around. Okay,
Well,
same goes
I
with
wouldn't
customer
call us
success.
the happiness department though, but
No, it's not about the happiness. In the end, it's always what is it for me?
yeah.
Why me as the CTO, as the VP of sales, or the VP or the
All right.
CEO should pay you
Yeah.
$200,000 if it doesn't address my main pain? Doesn't matter who below me wants it. Me as
Yes,
the decision
absolutely.
maker,
Hinyer,
I won't take it.
I want to go to Michelle and then I want to finish up the slide because right now we
Yeah.
should be going to breakout rooms. So we want to finish up some things. Michelle, what were you
Oh,
going to?
Jan,
share?
everyone kind of encapsulated what I was going to say. I often will ask our executive buyers, what is the cost of not doing anything at all, and leave it on the table? And that is that's a golden question that everyone should be able to feel comfortable asking, plus use the silence because they will talk amongst themselves and probably share it with you.
Yep. And that goes back to our session last week with Bob London, you know, asking those questions, right?
Yep.
That is part of what sets you up so that you have the information so that you can qualify what sort of situation. That's what we mean by qualified leads, where you can qualify if you've, you know, understand if what their budget is, if you're talking to the right people, what the situation is, how likely are they to renew, how likely are they to expand. All of those things go into understanding if you've qualified your lead, whatever type of lead that is, right? But then as a CS leader, have you set up a system for CS qualified leads? Because that is actually a process that you want to set up that feeds in from all of the information you have across your accounts, you know, from your CSMs, so that you understand what's happening to your overall program, so that then you can project your revenues, so that you can project, you know, 6 months out what's going to happen, you know, or, you know, with certain renewals, or what sort of expansion opportunities or white space. If you haven't heard the term white space, it comes from, if you were doing a graph and showing where people are, you know, what they've bought and what they haven't bought. What they haven't bought is the white space. And that's, you know, the white space is then referring to the opportunity. So Nir, I know that CSQLs and setting up this system is near and dear to your heart. Let's try and just spend a couple minutes getting into it. This is the meat of it, though. I do want to be sure we cover it.
So the CSQL, if you think about it, exactly, it's our pipeline to come to the CEO, CFO, the board, and tell them this is our prediction, this is our forecasting. This is how much money we believe going to enter from the existing customers in the next quarter, in the current quarter, in the next 6 months. Now, I will be very honest with you. Unless you're working in a really amazing company that the business is really rolling out like nuts, in the current recession, it's really hard to forecast for the next 6 months. Every forecast that you will do for the next 6 months will be a more of an estimation. You can guess really well for the next quarter. At least from my experience. And
but you can at least identify what's at risk that you know of, and start to try to come up with strategies to address.
But that's, if you think about it, part of our work as a CSM anyway is identify the risk. But when we are talking about more of understanding who is going to drop the usage, who is going not to sign, it's really, really hard to predict 6 months from now, especially if you sell to startups, because startups can tell you, yes, for sure, I'm going to renew 4 months from now. And 2 months later, they don't have any money and nobody knew except the CEO, right? So it's really, really hard, but we want to have a system where we always track the CSQL, we can forecast, we can measure it, and we update it in almost real time. And what I always tell to people, you always need to make sure that they update, exactly like sales doing focused meetings once a week. You want to do CSQL meeting once a week and see the change and understand, okay, maybe I need to help that CSM here. Maybe we need to pull some executives that maybe know some other executives on the other side to promise that CSQL will be executed in the way that we want. And last thing about qualities for renewals, we always need to remember, right? The executive buyer, if we show them the ROI and we talk about their emotions, we address their fears, their concerns, their wishful thinking, we will always going to get access to bigger money or to faster renewal process. What many times people miss is that, yes, I might have a buyer. That buyer is a check for a specific problem. That doesn't mean that that's an executive buyer. Executive buyer is many times VP or C-level. They have access to infinite funds. People don't really understand it. A CTO, a CEO, a VP of sales in organizations can always get more money if and only if we solve one of the major problems right now. If we can show that, we will get the money. They will push us to across the organization. Many times what CSMs are doing, they're focusing on the buyer itself, not the executive buyer. And then the renewal is always very tactical. Oh, 5 chairs left, 5 chairs right, I will give you 10% discount. Great. When you go up, and that's the place where you have 12 months to go up, to climb that ladder, because you cannot go to a renewal to pick up the phone and say, hey, CTO, I never met you. Let's meet because I want your money. That doesn't work. Okay. So you need to think like a game of chess, infinite game of chess that is always continue, because you might build relationship with the executive buyer, and guess what? 6 months later, he's leaving. There is a new player. You need to restart everything. You need to see the future in advance. And if you will build good relationship with those executive buyers, they're actually going to tell you in advance, hey, Nir, I just want to let you know, I'm going to leave in a month. This is the guy that's going to replace me. I'm going to do a warm introduction. And you know what? I'm going to already, let's do a quick renewal for the next 12 months so I can lock it you down. And as strange as it sounds, it happened to me so many times. That's where the relationship takes place. And that can only take place if I can show them the business value.
Right. So we're going to head out for our sessions. There's lots of resources here. We try to give a lot of resources, not just books, but also frameworks that might help as sort of an almost a checklist, an understanding of what things are you tracking as a leader, or what things as a CSM are you tracking? Have you checked these things off proactively as you enter into, renewals, or if you're thinking about your book of business and what sort of opportunities there are, right? So want to be sure to call attention to that. But these are our breakout questions. How comfortable do you feel with selling in the post-sales motion? And how would you feel more comfortable with selling? But do you have any questions about CSQLs or any of the information that we've covered so far before we go to breakout rooms? And can you put in if you haven't already recently, yes, there's the slides and the breakout notes there. Yeah, Trevor.
Yeah, and this might be better in the breakout, but I guess I'm curious when, like, Nir, for instance, you say having these meetings and looking at these metrics, like, what does that tend to look like? Are you using the same data that sales uses in the CRM and kind of playing off of that? Do you kind of like manipulate it and make it more useful for the CS team? Like, how exactly are you sort of charting it out?
When you talk about the data, are you talking about the usage data and the ROI data?
Well, whatever is useful for the CSQL.
So the way that I like to do it, and I found it really easy to do it and really powerful, is we build together what is the ROI. Okay, we do it with the product, with the sales, we have the ROI framework. And usually before every QBR, before the onboarding retrospective, before the renewal, the CSM will meet with the champion. They will close the recording, no recording, so it's really safe environment. And we tell them the story. Yeah, we build an ROI for you to put us accountable to the promise that we gave you. I want to fill it up with you. And we don't fill it up. We actually work with them. We ask this question on the calls. We fill it up and we can see the ROI. And if the ROI is amazing, the CSM will tell to the other person, hey, it's all you and your team. We have the QBR next week. I want you to talk about the ROI slide in front of the CTO. And if they don't feel comfortable, the CSM will talk it, but he will sell the hard work that champion did. And what actually happens is that the CTO now gets an ROI that not the service provider fill it up. His champion, the person that he trusts the most, fill it up. Because many times service providers fill the ROI by themselves and say, hey, customers, we save you $50 million. And the other side look at it and says, what a baloney. I know that it's not reality. Right? So this is the most important thing. And part of it is to understand where ROI is positive, negative, what we can do in order to improve, if need to improve, what is the usage. And we build together with the champion the story that we will present to the executive buyer.
Okay, we're really late. So we're going to go out for 18 minutes. So we have 2 minutes to come back at the end. And if anybody can stay a couple of minutes later, then we'll have a few minutes later. I apologize, but I wanted to be sure that we got through the CSQL and we took too much time on the other stuff first. So going to the breakout rooms, I'm going to open them now and off you go. Do you see it at the bottom of your screen? Awesome. I'll see you very soon. How did it go in the sessions? What kinds of things came up?
They were still discussing about the upselling opportunities, like how they're doing it in their offices.
Mhm. Any sort of aha moments or insights?
No, because of the poor network connection, I was not able to hear it continuously.
Right. What about for you, Sarah? Did you have any aha moments or insights or things that you were helpful that you shared with others?
Actually, we kind of came up with one that I
Um,
thought
no.
would be really helpful. So we were talking about how sometimes you're being given a new feature that you're expected to upsell to customers, but you have no data on what the value it will bring to customers or the ROI that's going to be expected from it.
Mhm.
And so just like the value of like beta customers that are willing to test a new feature and provide a positive business use case before you begin to upsell this feature to, across all of your customers. To be able to
Wow.
have that kind of real data before you kind of launch that initiative, both is going to allow you to test the new feature, make sure it works for a real life customer, and also get that positive business case. So
Right.
that was something that we just kind of talked about, and it kind of came out in the conversation. I thought, wow, in a perfect world, that would be incredible. It would make
Right,
selling
because
it
if
much
nothing
easier.
else, yeah, if nothing else, you can say, we've worked with others who have already used this and they've saved this amount of time, which was this amount of value to them, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I liked too, just in the QBR to have the customer champion talk about the ROI, right? And lead on that, both as something that they've accomplished, but also something that they've accomplished using your product. I thought that was a great idea. That was nice to hear. What about you, Trevor?
One of the things I like that our group talked about, and I'll let any of them speak up because I feel like some of them said it a little bit better, but we had a discussion around the sales and the CS sort of dynamic, especially when you have sometimes this division of account executives who are talking to the customer all the time and CSMs who are talking to the customer all the time, and how those can kind of like clash a little bit in terms of what their goals are, and basically just trying to figure out how to handle that. And I think the conclusion was that ideally at some point they become part of the same team. I think that's what Nir was at least talking about.
Yeah, it's certainly functionally better if you have the AMs under the same leader as the CSMs, preferably under like a CCO or VP of CS. Sometimes it goes the other way. And then the challenge is if you have a sales leader who doesn't understand the post-sales motion, then you need to educate them about that. So anyway, challenges with some of that. What other kinds of thoughts or questions came up or aha moments? Anybody have a favorite?
From the whole education side, I was interested in the thought that we don't usually train our CS teams in sales.
It's often true. I know. I've been harping on that. And it needs a separate type of training because, the objections and the, cases you cite and all of those things are different. Hi, Christine's cat. I forget your name. Randall, you had a thought you were going to share. Are you still with us?
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of brought up before, but I think we reiterated in our group about really sales is really about having the ammunition and the tools necessary to understand your customer, and you're really doing it more from like a consultative type of approach. And if you have the data and you can translate that into value, then really, yeah, you're selling, but it should be a lot easier in regards to how that process works versus kind of using, I think someone mentioned like the car salesman type of mentality in the way of selling. It shouldn't be done in that way. It should be a much more fluid conversation where that communication is done in a way that's very meaningful, because you've kind of displayed that in a way where customers really don't have the ability to, I don't want to say refute, but it's much harder to do it that way when you've had that information and you're doing more consultative in a consultative way.
I was talking to someone earlier today who was previously a coach turned salesperson. Because they were so good at coaching, then they went into a sales role with, without any stress really, because they treated everything as consultative selling and finding that match. And when you think about that in the post-sales motion, that's where you really want consultative selling. You want to be sure that you're looking for that match. And if it's not a match, then it should either be okay for them to say, oh yeah, no, I don't know, let's explore this, but no, maybe it's not. Or when you're exploring it, saying, yeah, it is a match. And to do it in such a way that it doesn't feel threatening, it doesn't feel, like it feels like part of, you do get me, you do know me, right? And that's when they feel seen and heard, and it helps to build the relationship. Yeah. Any other thoughts or insights coming up in this conversation? Definitely want to be sure to record it here. Should I look at the notes? What kinds of things came up in the notes?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get to my mute button. I think it was interesting that, thinking about one industry, like, is there a need for customer success to do sales? Because like if it's an electrical utility, then there's not much competition, and there may be some upsells there, right? Versus like a small little startup that's got 5 very different customer profiles, and you're trying to figure out how to adapt your process to each one of those, and map those accounts and figure that. And so industry felt like industry was a big key there.
Very
and then
true.
too, I think, yeah, like the value proposition that you're able to deliver on, and kind of your position within, basically, like how much are you really able to make an impact, and measure that impact, I think, and have that data readily available. I think that was kind of a key to feeling confident in making an upsell or arguing for an expansion. Do you have that data available, and is it built into the platform in a way that's automated so that you can make that case? I thought those were some interesting insights.
Yeah, ideally, it's nice if you have access to the data, certainly, to be able to make the case. And I
Yeah.
think and that you make a great point in that when you're looking at the post-sales motion, you have general fundamentals, but then how does that get applied to your customer base and product, right? And in some cases, then you might want to structure it differently. If you find, in some cases, the CSM is the most natural person to do the selling. In other cases, if there's a lot of legal or procurement and, you want to separate out the roles, I think it's still something where you want to be sure that you're aligned in what you're doing with revenue, and it may go over to the sales team, or preferably, I think, usually under a renewals manager or an account manager or something that feeds up to the post-sales leader, but still always taking into account what makes the most sense for your product base, your product and customer base. Sarah, and then Parth.
So kind of going back to the first question of like what made me initially uncomfortable with doing sales in CS, I think is something that's worth sharing. For me personally, I initially called into question the motivation of my selling, and the motivation, like the integrity of my role as a CSM. As soon as selling comes into the picture, will I still be viewed as a trusted advisor? And it was something that made me very adverse to selling in CS initially. And I think ultimately what helped me overcome it was that that training around how do you approach this as a CSM and truly understanding consultative selling, and that it is in fact in the best interest of the customer. Something that my group talked about that I thought was really interesting was how introducing something like a quota could call into question the integrity of your motivation to sell. If you have a quota that has like penalties, now you're selling to meet quota, not to be a consultative partner to your customer. So that was something that we discussed that, could be kind of a tricky topic that might make a CSM more nervous or adverse to selling, is depending on the motivation behind it.
Yep. Yep. No, really good points. Okay, Parth, then Jessica, and then we'll finish up for the evening, since we are already over by 10 minutes, which I appreciate those of you who are staying who can. All right, Parth.
Well, one of the things that Nir actually brought up was around making sure that CS and sales are trained on the same framework. I didn't really think about how important that is, but I was lucky enough at Airtable, where I previously worked, we did that. Like, we had command of the message and medic, and we all got the training. The crazy part was the CSMs at Airtable had no revenue obligations, but it was still really helpful that we were all on the same sheet of music. And at the previous organization that I was at before Airtable, we didn't do that. But even if if your company doesn't have resources to invest in you like that, you can just ask your sales counterparts, what framework do you guys train under? And then YouTube that framework. You can learn a lot about that framework in just a quick YouTube video. And again, making sure that you're on the same sheet of music with your sales rep. And then the other thing that I brought up was around like compensation plans and making sure you guys have some alignment in compensation plan. That kind of goes to executive and C-level decisions, but I still think that's a really big factor, and I've seen that work well in a previous organization that I was at.
Love that that you mentioned that even if you don't have the actual responsibility for the revenue, you're still leading into that conversation. And as a CS leader, you want to be sure that you're setting up a CS qualified lead system so that you're getting credit for those leads that you are sending over for that final finish line in the revenue. And you can only really do that well, like you were saying, is if you're trained on the same methodology, so that you're leading them up properly. That's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Jessica, you're going to finish us up tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. I'm learning a lot today. I think I'm just actually coming away with one more, I guess, a question, which is, what role does the product team have in the sales motion? And I know that we're talking about sales, so we're talking about account executives and CSMs, but this also just made me think about, like, what role can the product team have, what responsibility they have. They're not necessarily in the meeting with us, but I do believe, if we're moving towards more of a product-led growth, I need to make sure that the product team also, that we're aligned. And I'm not so sure that I have always seen that in my roles. So I'm starting to have more questions about that right now.
That is a great question. I know I have some thoughts on that. Nir, do you want to speak to that at all? You're on mute.
So I think that when we talk about product, so products play a really important role as part of building the ROI and help to distill the business value, because at the end, every feature that they will build, they will need to explain what is the business value of that feature. This is one aspect. But the second aspect, if you think about it, during upsells and renewals, part of the opportunity or the CSQL activities is to understand what might block that activity, what might block the renewal. And many times it will be related to product. We need that feature that your competitor has, that it's part of our business activities. Without it, we cannot continue. This is the place where we want to have product to be involved, to say, okay, we can do it. We understand what it means. We understand that if we won't build it, we will lose $200 million, $200,000, whatever. And it's aligned to our vision as well, right? So they are playing a role very similar to the role that they're playing in sales, by the way. Good product actually help to close deals by understanding which features needs to be developed down the road to help deals to be closed.
And I would just add to that, Jessica, that it's not just the kind of the roadmap, but also when you take a look at the friction that is in the customer journey, oftentimes that has to do with the product. And so if the product team is looking at the product from the customer perspective and thinking about what friction exists in that customer journey, then they should also be prioritizing how to remove that friction, because again, that's what leads to successful renewals and expansions or not. And so they actually can, your customers benefit from your product team having that customer hat on and understanding the customer and how the product is being used, as much as everyone else benefits when they're trying to sell to the customer, right? In the end, it is the way that they're using the product that determines if they want to renew with you. And that happens then whether they understand the value they've received and making certain that they're adopting and optimizing the product, but then also if they can use it. Sometimes it's just not solving their need, or they have too much friction to actually physically, just like be able to use the product. So yeah, product's very much a part of the go-to-market team. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate everything. Next week, we're going to be talking about negotiations, and it should be a really fun conversation. We have somebody who is a renewals manager at Okta, who I know really well, who's going to be co-leading the session. And that's what she does all day long. She just, that's her job. She's negotiating. And so I think Erica Farber Anderson will be someone you'll really enjoy meeting. And it should be a lot of fun next week. All right. Be sure to go and continue the conversation in Slack. Great to have everybody here. Thanks for sticking around to the very end. It's great to see you all.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Jan.
All
Great
right.
meeting.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.